The first time my supervising nurse told everyone on the floor that I was just an intern, not worth slowing down for. The patient was still alive. If that sentence already made your stomach tighten, pause here for a second. Like the video, subscribe, leave a comment about where you're listening from. What happened next didn't just end my internship. It rewrote my family, my career, and the way I understood silence. My name is Hannah Reed. I was 27 years old, a nursing intern in my final clinical rotation at St. Mary's Regional Medical Center in Dayton, Ohio. I had 8 months left before sitting for the NCLEX. 8 months. That's how close I was. I grew up being told to keep my head down by my parents, Margaret Reed, a church volunteer who collected other people's gratitude like trophies, and Thomas Reed, a former factory supervisor who believed authority was something you never questioned, only absorbed. My older brother, Daniel Reed, never had to keep his head down. He was loud, charming, and constantly finding himself. He dropped out of community college twice. He moved back home 3 times. Every time he needed money, my parents found it. Every time I needed support, I was told, "You're strong. You'll manage." I did manage. Scholarships, night shifts as a CNA, student loans stacked neatly like bricks I carried alone. By the time I landed my internship at St. Mary's, I had logged more clinical hours than anyone in my cohort. I could insert IVs cleanly. I could chart fast without missing details. I noticed patterns. I caught medication discrepancies twice during my rotation, quietly flagging them before harm happened. No one thanked me for that. On my unit, Medical Surgical Floor 4B, interns were invisible unless something went wrong. And when something went wrong, we were suddenly very visible. My preceptor was Laura Bennett, RN, 10 years in, sharp eyeliner, sharper tone. She didn't like interns. She liked control. "Watch," she'd say, not looking at me. "Don't touch," she'd add, louder, when I reached for anything. And when I asked questions, she'd sigh theatrically so everyone could hear. The nurses' station laughed when she did it. The morning everything broke open started like every other shift. 6:45 a.m. Handoff, cold coffee, scrubs that never quite dried right after night laundry. Our patient was Mr. Edward Collins, 68, admitted for pneumonia complications, stable overnight. Oxygen saturation borderline, but holding. He was scared, but lucid. He joked about hospital food. He asked me my name twice and thanked me both times. At 9:20 a.m., his oxygen levels dipped. Not a crash, a warning. I saw it. I said it. "Laura, his sats are trending down," I told her, holding the chart. She didn't look up from her phone. "He's fine." At 9:27, the monitor alarmed again. I stepped closer. "Laura, we might need respiratory." She finally turned, eyes cold. "Hannah, stop panicking. This is why interns don't make decisions." At 9:31, Mr. Collins started gasping. Everything after that moved fast and slow at the same time. Call bell, shouting, a code blue that echoed down the hallway. The attending physician, Dr. Michael Harris, arrived breathless. Respiratory therapy flooded in. They intubated. They worked him for 17 minutes. He didn't make it. Afterward, the unit fell into that hollow quiet hospitals get when something irreversible has happened. People avoided eye contact. Charts suddenly became very interesting. Laura pulled me aside near the supply room. "Do not say anything," she said. Her voice was low, urgent. "You don't understand how these things work." I nodded because that's what I'd been trained to do. Nod. Absorb. Stay small. The incident report listed rapid deterioration. Unavoidable. My name was nowhere in it. That afternoon, the nurse manager, Patricia Cole, called a brief huddle. "These things happen," she said. "We'll move forward." No mention of missed warnings. No questions. I went home, numb. I sat on my bed in my childhood room because, yes, I still lived at home. Intern pay doesn't cover rent in Dayton, and my parents had insisted it made sense. At dinner, my mother served meatloaf and asked Daniel how his job search was going. "It's rough out there," Daniel said, mouth full. "People don't appreciate talent." My father nodded sympathetically. I waited. "Hannah," my mother said finally, You look tired. A patient died today, I said. My voice didn't shake. That scared me more than tears would have. My father frowned. That's the job. I warned them, I said. I said something was wrong. My mother waved her fork. Hospitals are stressful. Don't create problems where there aren't any. Daniel smirked. You always overthink things. Something tightened in my chest. Not anger, recognition. 3 days later, during morning rounds, Patricia Cole announced an internal review. Joint Commission auditors were coming in 2 weeks. Charts would be scrutinized. Laura glanced at me across the station. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. At lunch, another intern whispered, "They're saying you froze during the code." I stared at her. Who's saying that? She didn't answer. She didn't have to. By the end of the shift, I was pulled into Patricia's office. "Hannah," Patricia said gently, folding her hands. "There are concerns about your readiness." My heart slowed instead of raced. That was new. "What concerns?" I asked. She slid a paper across the desk. A performance note. Vague, damaging, official. It wasn't written by Laura. It was written by Dr. Michael Harris, and that's when I understood. The warning I gave. The silence that followed. The story that replaced it. I wasn't just being overlooked. I was being positioned. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. By the next morning, my name felt heavier. It wasn't written anywhere new, but it moved differently through the unit. People said it softer, or not at all. When I walked onto 4B at 6:50 a.m., the charge nurse, Angela Morris, didn't look up from the assignment board. She slid the clipboard toward me without meeting my eyes. "You're floated today," she said. "Floated where?" I asked. "Observation," she replied. "Low acuity. You'll stay out of the way." Out of the way. Observation was where interns were sent when the floor didn't want witnesses. Stable patients, minimal interaction, no chance to redeem yourself, no chance to mess up again. As I walked down the hallway, I replayed the timeline in my head, the way nurses do when they can't sleep. 9:20, 9:27, 9:31. I could see the monitor numbers like they were burned behind my eyes. I had said something. I knew I had. At 10:15 a.m., Dr. Michael Harris appeared at the observation desk. He didn't sit. He stood with his arms crossed, scanning the room like he was late for something more important. "Hannah," he said, "walk with me." We stopped near the medication room. He didn't lower his voice. "In the future," he said, "if you're unsure about a patient's status, escalate through proper channels." I did, I said. I told Laura Bennett, twice. His jaw tightened. "Laura says you seemed anxious, panicked." "I wasn't," I said, calm, even. I was concerned. He looked at me for a long second, measuring. "Concern without authority is noise," he said. "You need to learn the difference." Then he walked away. That sentence stayed with me all day. Concern without authority is noise. At home that night, my mother had invited her sister over. Aunt Carol Whitman sat at the table with a glass of iced tea, nodding sympathetically as my mother recounted Daniel's latest interview disappointment. "He's under so much pressure," my mother said. "Men carry things differently." I cleared my throat. I might be written up. My mother blinked. "For what?" "A patient died," I said, "and they're saying I mishandled it." Aunt Carol pursed her lips. "Hospitals are political." My father didn't look up from his plate. "You don't want to be difficult this close to graduation." "I wasn't difficult," I said. I spoke up. My mother's voice sharpened. "Hannah, don't start." Daniel leaned back in his chair. "Look, if you can't handle pressure, maybe this isn't your thing." That did it. Not because it hurt, because it clarified. They weren't worried about me. They were worried about disruption. That night, I pulled up my clinical log. Every shift, every note. I'd always been meticulous. Dates, times, observations. I'd learned early that memory was unreliable, but documentation wasn't. I noticed something I hadn't before. Laura Bennett had signed off on my assessments, late. Always late. Sometimes hours after they were done. At 1:12 a.m., my phone buzzed. A text from Emily Park, another intern. "They're blaming you." Quietly. "Be careful." I typed back 2 words. "Thank you." The next day, Patricia Cole scheduled a support meeting. Support meetings are where accountability goes to die. She sat across from me, fingers steepled. Laura Bennett sat beside her, arms crossed, posture relaxed. Laura sighed. You hesitated during the code. I didn't, I said. I wasn't leading it. Laura smiled thinly. You froze. I called out the SATs earlier, I said. Twice. Patricia, there it was. The moment where truth stopped being relevant. At the end of the meeting, Patricia slid another paper toward me. A remediation plan. Extra supervision. Limited duties. A note that would follow me to any future recommendation. I signed it, not because I agreed, because I needed time. That afternoon, I went to the hospital library instead of the break room. I pulled Joint Commission guidelines, escalation protocols, incident reporting standards, and there it was, a requirement that all early warning signs be documented and acknowledged. I had documented. Laura hadn't. The discrepancy was small, technical, easy to miss if you weren't looking for it, but once you saw it, it changed everything. At dinner that night, my mother asked if I'd calm down. I'm fine, I said. That was because for the first time since starting nursing school, I wasn't trying to be liked. I was trying to be correct. And those two things were about to collide in a way none of them expected. The first formal complaint was filed without my name on it. That's how these things always start. Quiet, anonymous, designed to look like concern instead of strategy. I found out because Emily Park cornered me near the medication room just before shift change. She didn't look nervous. She looked angry on my behalf, which was rarer. They opened a safety review, she said. Unofficial. It's being framed as a pattern issue. What pattern? I asked. Emily's mouth tightened. Intern anxiety. I nodded slowly. Pattern issues are useful. They turn one event into a personality flaw. By the end of that shift, my badge access stopped working on 2 medication carts. Not all of them. Just enough to slow me down. Just enough to make it look like incompetence if anyone noticed. No one mentioned it. At home, my father was watching the news. My mother folded laundry on the couch. Daniel was asleep upstairs, unemployed again. I stood in the doorway for a moment, watching them exist in a world that didn't require explanation. Dad, I said, can I ask you something? He muted the TV. What is it? If someone sees a problem and speaks up, but the person above them ignores it, whose fault is it if something goes wrong? He didn't hesitate. The person in charge. My mother looked up. Why are you asking? I met my father's eyes. Because that's not what's happening at work. My mother's hands stilled. Hannah, don't get obsessed. That word again. Obsessed. Daniel wandered in, scratching his head. What's going on? Your sister thinks she's being targeted, my mother said lightly. Daniel snorted. That tracks. I looked at him. Do you know what retaliation looks like in a hospital? He shrugged. You're dramatic. I turned back to my parents. If this goes on my record, I won't match anywhere. Years of school, gone. My father sighed. Then keep your head down. That night, I made a decision. I stopped talking, not emotionally, strategically. I showed up early. I charted cleanly. I asked questions only in writing. I emailed summaries after every shift. Dates, times, language that left no room for interpretation. Laura noticed. You don't need to CC management on everything, she said one morning. I was advised to document, I replied evenly. Her jaw tightened. On Thursday, the review escalated. I was called into a meeting with risk management. The representative was Janet Holloway. Gray hair, neutral expression, voice trained to sound sympathetic without offering safety. This is exploratory, Janet said. We're just gathering context. Laura sat across from me, Patricia Cole beside her. Janet asked me to walk through the timeline. I did. Calm, precise, no emotion. Then Janet asked Laura the same. Laura's version was smoother, less specific. She spoke in impressions. She seemed unsure. There was confusion. I didn't realize she was escalating. Janet nodded thoughtfully. Then she turned to me. Do you have documentation of your concerns prior to the event? Yes, I said. I slid a folder across the table. Printed emails. Time-stamped chart notes. A clinical log with entries written before the code, not after. The room changed. Patricia shifted in her seat. Laura stopped smiling. Janet flipped through the pages slowly. These notes were entered at 9:21 and 9:28, Janet said. Before the code. Yes. An escalation protocol requires acknowledgement, Janet said, which is not documented. Silence. Laura cleared her throat. I must have intended to. Janet raised a hand. We'll follow up. The meeting ended quickly after that. Not resolved, but no longer controlled. That evening, my mother confronted me in the kitchen. I got a call, she said, from Carol, my aunt. Always the messenger. She said you're involving lawyers. I'm involving policy, I said. You're going to get a reputation, my mother warned. I looked at her. I already have one. I didn't choose it. She opened her mouth, then closed it. You've always been difficult when you feel cornered. I almost laughed. Later that night, Emily Park texted me. You shook them today. Be careful, I replied. I am. 2 days later, I was removed from Laura's supervision. Officially, it was to reduce tension. Unofficially, it was damage control. My new preceptor was Samuel Ortiz, RN. Quiet, observant, with a habit of listening longer than most people were comfortable with. On our first shift together, he watched me for an hour without comment. Then he said, You notice things early. Yes. And you document them. Yes. He nodded once. Keep doing that. That was it. No advice, no warning. But the shift wasn't over, because the story had already left the unit. At Sunday dinner, my parents had guests. Church friends. People who asked polite questions and listened for tone, not content. Hannah's having a hard time at work, my mother said casually. Stress gets to her. I smiled politely. One of the women, Linda Myers, touched my arm. Hospitals can be brutal. You have to be tough. I nodded. I am. She smiled, unconvinced. After they left, my father said, You embarrassed your mother. I didn't respond. That night, I reviewed the hospital's whistleblower policy. Protected disclosures, retaliation clauses, reporting channels outside unit management. I wasn't ready yet. But I was close. Because once you see how many people benefit from your silence, staying quiet stops feeling safe. And I could feel something building. Not anger, resolve. The kind that doesn't announce itself. The kind that waits for the right moment to speak. The moment my hospital ID stopped opening the staff entrance, I knew they'd moved from quiet pressure to open force. It happened at 6:42 a.m. I tapped the badge once. Red light. Again. Red light. The security guard, Marcus Lee, glanced up from his desk, already uncomfortable. Try again, he said. I did. Same result. Marcus checked his screen. His eyebrows lifted slightly, then smoothed back into neutrality. Looks like your access is temporarily limited. Administration thing. Limited how? Unit access only. No pharmacy wing. No records office. I nodded. Thanks. He didn't meet my eyes when he buzzed me in. By the time I reached 4B, half the staff already knew. That's how hospitals work. Information moves faster when it's meant to isolate someone. Laura Bennett wasn't there. Neither was Patricia Cole. Instead, a printed notice was taped to the charge desk. Temporary role adjustment intern. Hannah Reed. Direct patient care suspended, pending review. No meeting, no warning, no explanation, just removal. A nurse I barely knew, Rachel Kim, avoided my gaze as she passed. Someone else whispered my name, then stopped when I turned. I stood there for a full minute, hands at my sides, feeling the weight of it. Not panic. Exposure. This was public. Samuel Ortiz found me near the supply closet. They didn't tell you? He asked quietly. No. His jaw tightened. That's not protocol. I know. He lowered his voice. Go to risk management. Don't stay here. I nodded and turned away before anyone could see my face change. Risk management was on the 3rd floor, tucked behind administrative offices that smelled like copier toner and lemon cleaner. Janet Holloway wasn't in. Her assistant, Mark Ellison, offered me a chair and a rehearsed smile. Ms. Reed, this is procedural. Then why wasn't I notified? I asked. He folded his hands. We're still gathering context. My badge access was altered, I said. That's not context. That's action. He hesitated. There have been concerns raised about your conduct. By whom? He didn't answer. I left without raising my voice. That afternoon, I received the email. From Patricia Cole. Subject: Internship status update. It was short, carefully worded. Temporary suspension from clinical duties, pending outcome of review. For my own well-being and patient safety. Patient safety. The phrase sat there like a bruise. I forwarded it to myself, then to a private folder. Then I printed it. At home, my mother was already on the phone when I walked in. "I know," she was saying. "It's been so stressful." She covered the receiver when she saw me. Aunt Carol again. I went to the kitchen and poured a glass of water. "She's worried about you," my mother continued, voice low. "People talk." "They already are," I said. She hung up and turned to me. "Why didn't you tell us this was getting serious?" "I did." "No," she said sharply. "You told us your version." I looked at her. "This is my version." My father came in from the garage, wiping his hands on a rag. "What's going on?" "Hannah's been pulled from patient care," my mother said. "Temporarily." My father frowned. "That's not good." "No," I agreed. "You must have rubbed someone the wrong way," he said. There it was. Cause assigned. Responsibility shifted. Daniel wandered in behind him. "So you're basically suspended?" "From clinical duties," I said. "Not the program." He smirked. "That's what everyone says at first." I felt it then. The familiar narrowing. The way my family closed ranks around discomfort by pushing it toward me. "I need to make some calls," I said. My mother's voice sharpened. "Don't do anything rash." "I won't," I said. And I meant it. In my room, I opened my laptop and pulled up the whistleblower policy again. This time, I didn't skim. Protected disclosures included reporting unsafe patient care, failure to escalate, and retaliation following internal reporting. I had documentation for all three. The reporting channel bypassed unit management entirely. It went to compliance, and compliance reported directly to the hospital board. I drafted the report slowly. No emotion, just facts, dates, names, attachments. Before I hit submit, my phone buzzed. A text from Emily Park. "They're saying you're unstable. Be careful what you do next." I stared at the message, then typed back, "I'm very stable." I submitted the report at 9:14 p.m. Confirmation number appeared immediately. That was the moment the power dynamic shifted. The next day, compliance responded. They requested a meeting. Not next week. The following morning. By then, the rumor mill was spinning hard. A nurse I didn't recognize stopped me near the elevators. "Are you the intern who filed?" "I filed what?" I asked. She flushed and walked away. At dinner, my parents sat stiffly. "Someone from church asked if you were suing the hospital," my mother said. "I'm cooperating with an investigation," I replied. My father rubbed his temple. "This is going to follow you." "So was staying quiet," I said. He looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time. Not as a daughter, as a variable he couldn't control. The compliance meeting took place in a conference room with no windows and a long, polished table. 3 people sat across from me. Eleanor Price, Director of Compliance, Victor Salazar, Legal Counsel, and Janet Holloway, Risk Management. No Laura, no Patricia. Eleanor spoke first. "We've reviewed your submission." I waited. "There are discrepancies," she said, "and patterns." Victor leaned forward, "including possible retaliation." Janet didn't look at me. Eleanor folded her hands. "We need you to walk us through everything. From the beginning." I did. I spoke for 42 minutes. No embellishment, no tears, no accusation beyond what the documents supported. When I finished, the room was quiet. Eleanor nodded once. "Thank you," Victor added. "You did the right thing." That sentence landed differently than all the others. As I stood to leave, Eleanor said, "Ms. Reed, please don't discuss this with anyone. We will handle communication." I nodded. Outside, the hallway felt longer than usual. My phone buzzed again. A voicemail from Patricia Cole. "Hannah," she said, too cheerful. "Let's touch base. I think there's been a misunderstanding." I didn't call her back, because for the first time since this started, I wasn't reacting. I was being responded to, and whatever was about to happen next wasn't going to stay contained inside the hospital. It was already bleeding outward, into reputations, into families, into truths that had been buried too long to stay quiet now. By the time compliance locked down my hospital email, the story had already escaped the building. That's how I knew the investigation was real. If it had been cosmetic, meant to pacify me, they would have let rumors burn me out quietly. Instead, they cut access. No internal messages, no charting, no hallway explanations. Silence enforced from the top down. Silence is only powerful when you're the one imposing it. At 8:12 a.m., Eleanor Price emailed my personal account. Please remain off-site until further notice. Your stipend will continue. Do not communicate with unit staff. That last line mattered. It meant they weren't protecting the unit from me. They were protecting me from the unit. At home, my parents reacted the way they always did when control slipped. My mother cleaned aggressively. Countertops that were already spotless. The sound of disinfectant wipes tearing echoed through the kitchen. My father paced. "This is blowing up," he said. "People are asking questions." I sat at the table with my laptop closed. That was inevitable. "You don't understand how this looks," my mother snapped. "A young woman accusing senior staff?" "I documented facts," I said, "not feelings." "That's worse," my father said. "Facts don't forgive." Daniel came downstairs in sweatpants, phone in hand. "So you're basically suing the hospital now?" "No. Everyone thinks you are," he said. "I saw a post." "What post?" He turned the screen toward me. A local nursing forum. Anonymous. Vicious. Intern files. Complaint after fatal code. Sources say performance issues preceded incident. I recognized the phrasing, Laura Bennett's phrasing. My mother covered her mouth. "This is humiliating." "For you," I said. That landed. "You could still stop this," my father said. "Withdraw the complaint." I shook my head. "I can't. And even if I could, I wouldn't." My mother's voice cracked. "Why are you doing this to us?" I met her eyes. "I'm not." That afternoon, I received a call from Victor Salazar, Hospital Legal Counsel. "We're placing several individuals on administrative leave pending review," he said. "This includes your former preceptor." I closed my eyes. Not in relief, in confirmation. "And Dr. Harris?" I asked. A pause. "Also included." That was when my hands started shaking. Not from fear, from release. Victor continued. "We'll need a formal statement, recorded, on the record." "When?" "Tomorrow morning." After the call, I sat alone in my room for a long time, listening to the house move around me. Cabinets opening, footsteps, the television murmuring. No one came to check on me. At dinner, my mother announced that Aunt Carol and 2 church friends were coming by to pray. I stood. "I'm not participating." My father looked up sharply. "Don't be rude." "I won't be present," I said. "There's a difference." I ate in my room. At 10:37 p.m., my phone buzzed. A text from Samuel Ortiz. "They escorted Laura out today. Security badge pulled. No explanation given." I stared at the screen. Then, another message. "You were right," I typed back slowly. "I know." The next morning, I arrived at the hospital for my recorded statement through a side entrance. No badge, no uniform. Just me, a folder, and a clarity I hadn't felt in years. The room was small, neutral. Victor Salazar sat across from me, a recorder between us. Eleanor Price to the side, hands folded. "State your name for the record," Victor said. "Hannah Reed." He nodded. "Begin wherever you feel is appropriate." I didn't start with the code. I started with patterns. How interns were discouraged from escalating. How Laura dismissed concerns publicly. How chart acknowledgments were delayed. How warnings were reframed as anxiety. I spoke for an hour. When I finished, Eleanor said quietly, "You're not the first to describe this." That mattered more than any apology. Afterward, as I left the building, a nurse I'd never met whispered, "Thank you," as I passed. I nodded once. At home, my parents were waiting. My mother's eyes were red. My father looked older than he had a week ago. "They put Laura on leave," my father said. "People know." "Yes, and Dr. Harris," my mother added. "He was respected." "So was the patient who died," I said. Daniel leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "You happy now?" I looked at him. Really looked. "I'm clear," I said. That night, my phone lit up with messages from people I didn't know. Other interns, former nurses, short notes. I saw it too. "This happened to me last year. They shut me up." I didn't respond to all of them. I couldn't. But I saved every message. Because this wasn't just about me anymore. And if this story resonates with you, if you've ever been told to stay quiet to protect a system that wouldn't protect you back, pause here. Like, subscribe, leave a comment. Someone else needs to hear this part. The next email from compliance came 3 days later. It wasn't cautious. It was decisive. We have substantiated multiple claims. Further action will follow. My parents didn't speak during breakfast. My mother finally said, "What if they blacklist you?" I took a sip of coffee. Then they have to explain why. She looked at me like she didn't recognize me. Maybe she didn't. Because the daughter who absorbed blame to keep peace was gone. And what replaced her wasn't loud. It was documented. And documentation has a way of turning whispers into records, which meant the next phase wouldn't be subtle. It would be structural. And once structures start collapsing, they don't fall quietly. The letter arrived on hospital letterhead. Thick paper. The kind meant to signal seriousness before you read a word. It came by certified mail. My mother signed for it while I was in the shower. I knew because when I came downstairs, the envelope was on the kitchen table, untouched, like it might explode if opened. She stood at the sink, staring out the window. "That's from the hospital," she said. "Yes. You're not even curious?" "I already know what it says," I replied. I did. Not the exact wording, but the direction. Compliance investigations only move one way once they cross a certain threshold. I opened it calmly. The hospital had substantiated retaliation. Failure to escalate had been confirmed. Documentation discrepancies were validated. Effective immediately, my clinical suspension was lifted. My internship would resume under a different department. My record would be amended. And then the line that made my throat tighten. Just once. The institution apologizes for the distress caused. My father read over my shoulder. He exhaled slowly. "So, you're cleared." "Yes." My mother turned around. "That's it?" "For me," I said. "Yes." She frowned. "What about everyone else?" "That's not my outcome to manage." That was the moment my parents finally understood something fundamental. I was no longer buffering consequences for other people. 2 days later, Eleanor Price called. "We're restructuring leadership on 4B, she said. "Your former nurse manager has been placed on administrative leave, pending final review." "And Laura Bennett?" I asked. "She has been terminated. No drama, no ceremony, just removal," Eleanor continued. "We're also notifying the state board regarding procedural failures." I closed my eyes briefly. "And Dr. Harris?" A pause. "His privileges are under review." That review would take months, maybe longer. Physicians don't fall fast, but they do fall eventually, when enough paper stacks up. My new placement was ICU step-down, supervised by Dr. Renee Wallace, a critical care attendee known for her intolerance of ego. On my first day, she introduced herself without looking at my file. "I've read the investigation," she said. "I care about 2 things. Do you see early signs, and do you speak up?" "Yes." "Good," she replied. "Then we won't have problems. No warning. No threat, just expectation." On the unit, the energy was different. Quieter. Focused. People spoke in complete sentences. Questions were answered, not punished. During rounds, I flagged a subtle blood pressure trend in a post-op patient. Dr. Wallace listened, adjusted orders, nodded once. "Good catch, Hannah." That was it. No audience. No performance. At home, the shift was slower. My parents didn't know how to interact with me now that the narrative had flipped. My mother stopped offering advice. My father stopped correcting me mid-sentence. Daniel, however, struggled. "So you're like some kind of hero now?" he said one night, half joking. "No," I replied. "I'm just not invisible." He scoffed. "You always need things to be a big deal." I looked at him. "You've never been punished for someone else's mistake. That's the difference." He didn't respond. A week later, my Aunt Carol called. "Hannah," she said carefully, "people are saying the hospital settled quietly." "Yes." "Well," she continued, "you should consider forgiveness. Holding grudges isn't healthy." I smiled. "I'm not holding anything." After I hung up, I realized something unsettling. My family had never asked if the patient's family had been informed. They never asked if anyone apologized to them. They were only concerned with how this reflected on us. That realization didn't hurt. It clarified. At the hospital, more interns started talking to me. Not loudly. In hallways, by vending machines. This happened to me last year. They told me I was emotional. I wish I'd done what you did. I told them all the same thing. Document. Then document again. One afternoon, Samuel Ortiz stopped me outside the break room. "They're changing escalation training," he said. "Mandatory. Hospital-wide." I nodded. "Good." He hesitated. "You know they'll never say it was because of you." "I know." "That bother you?" "No," I said. And I meant it. Because this was never about credit. It was about removal of threat. The threat had always been my silence breaking at the wrong moment for them. At dinner one night, my mother finally spoke. "I didn't realize how much you were carrying," she said quietly. I didn't look up from my plate. "I know." She waited. I should have listened. "Yes," I said. She swallowed. "I'm sorry." I let the silence sit between us. "I accept that you're sorry," I said finally. "I'm not returning to how things were." Her eyes filled. She nodded. That was enough. Late that night, an email arrived from Victor Salazar. Subject: Next steps. The hospital was offering a formal settlement. Not money. A letter of commendation, a clean reference, and an invitation to participate in a patient safety advisory panel. They weren't buying silence. They were buying alignment. I stared at the screen for a long time. This was the next choice. Not whether I'd survive, but how visible I was willing to be now that I could no longer be erased. And I knew, in that moment, that staying quiet again would cost more than speaking ever had. So I replied with 3 words. I will participate. Because the truth was, this story had stopped being about revenge. It had become about leverage. And leverage, once earned, doesn't belong to fear anymore. It belongs to the person willing to use it carefully, which meant the hardest part wasn't over. It was just changing shape. The first advisory panel meeting felt nothing like the hospital floor. No alarms, no rushing carts, no unspoken hierarchy vibrating through the air. Just a long conference table, 12 chairs, name placards, and coffee that had been sitting too long on a warmer. My placard read, "Hannah Reed, nursing intern." Not former, not suspended, not flagged. Present. Eleanor Price opened the meeting. Victor Salazar sat 2 seats down, legal pad closed. Around the table were department heads, risk officers, 1 physician representative, and 2 nurses I recognized from other units. No one smiled at me. No one dismissed me either. That was new. "We're here to review escalation failures and cultural barriers," Eleanor said. "This is not about blame. It's about systems." I noticed how carefully she said it. This room wasn't built for emotion. It was built for liability reduction. Fine, I could work with that. Halfway through the meeting, Dr. Alan Mercer, a senior pulmonologist with silver hair and an air of practiced authority, spoke up. "In high acuity settings," he said, "we can't afford to respond to every concern raised by trainees. There has to be discretion." The room went quiet. I didn't jump in. I waited. That was something I'd learned the hard way. Eleanor glanced around. "Hannah?" I nodded once. "Discretion is only safe when authority is responsive," I said. "When it isn't, early warnings become invisible. That's where patients get hurt." Dr. Mercer studied me. "Are you saying attending should defer to interns?" "No," I replied evenly. "I'm saying dismissing data because of who delivers it is not discretion. It's bias." No one interrupted. I continued. "The problem wasn't escalation. The problem was acknowledgement. Silence was interpreted as reassurance." Victor wrote something down. After the meeting, a nurse named Janine Brooks approached me. "I've been here 22 years, she said. "You said out loud what we've learned to work around." I nodded. "Working around isn't the same as fixing." She smiled faintly. "No, it's just quieter." At home, the shift continued. My mother started asking before speaking. That might not sound like much, but in our house, it was seismic. My father stopped offering solutions. Daniel stopped making jokes about my work altogether. One night, he came into the kitchen while I was studying. "They're cutting overtime at the plant," he said. I waited. "You think you could look at my resume?" he asked. There it was. Not entitlement. Need. I closed my laptop. "Yes," I said. "I can." His shoulders dropped slightly, like something had been released. That didn't fix years of imbalance, but it was movement. At the hospital, rumors shifted. Laura Bennett's termination was no longer whispered. It was referenced in training modules. Not by name, by behavior. Dr. Harris was placed on supervised practice pending further review. His authority narrowed, not destroyed. contained. The system was protecting itself, but it was also learning. One afternoon, Dr. Renee Wallace stopped me in the hallway. "You know this makes you visible," she said. "Yes, and that visibility has a cost." "I know," she nodded. "Just checking." The cost arrived sooner than expected. An email from the nursing school administration flagged me for a professional conduct review. Not disciplinary, procedural. The reason cited? External involvement impacting institutional relationships. They weren't accusing me of wrongdoing. They were reminding me I wasn't untouchable. I forwarded the email to Victor. His reply was immediate. "We anticipated this. I will handle communication." For the first time, I wasn't alone in the process. That mattered. At dinner, my mother mentioned church again. "They asked how you're doing," she said. "And?" "I said you were busy," she replied. "Important busy." I looked at her. "Thank you." She nodded. "I'm learning." That weekend, I received an email from the family of Edward Collins. They didn't know my role exactly. They'd been told there were procedural failures. They wanted to thank whoever spoke up. I read the email twice. Then I closed my laptop and sat in silence for a long time. This wasn't closure, but it was alignment. The system was shifting, slowly, under pressure. And pressure doesn't have to explode to be effective. Sometimes, it just has to be sustained. As I prepared for my next ICU step-down shift, I realized something. I wasn't waiting for permission anymore. I wasn't asking to belong. I was operating inside my values, with or without approval. And that meant the next confrontation wouldn't come from the hospital. It would come from the place that had always expected my compliance. Home. Because systems don't like it when the quiet one learns how to speak. And families don't like it when the role they assigned stops being available. The confrontation didn't arrive with shouting. It arrived with planning. My mother told me on a Wednesday afternoon that my parents were hosting a small family dinner on Sunday. Just us. No church friends, no prayer circle. Her voice was careful, like she was handling something fragile. "Your Aunt Carol will be there," she added, "and your cousin Megan." I knew what that meant. Family dinners were where decisions were announced, as if they'd already been agreed to. Where resistance was framed as disruption. Where tone mattered more than truth. "I'll come," I said. There was a pause on the line. Relief. Good. On Sunday, the house smelled like roast chicken and lemon. Familiar. Comforting. Strategic. My Aunt Carol Whitman hugged me too tightly. My cousin Megan Whitman, 24, fresh out of a short-lived nursing program she dropped after one semester, smiled with the polite curiosity of someone measuring herself against me. Dinner started normally. Safe topics. Daniel's job search, my father's back pain, my mother's church committee. Then Carol leaned forward, folding her napkin. "Hannah," she said gently, "we've all been talking." There it was. "Talking about what?" I asked. "About the attention this situation has brought," she replied. "It's a lot." My mother nodded. "We're proud of you," she added quickly. "But people are asking questions." Megan chimed in, voice light. "Hospitals are political. You don't want to burn bridges before you even start." I took a sip of water. I didn't rush. "What are you asking me to do?" I said. Carol exchanged a look with my mother. "Maybe step back, decline the panel, let things settle." My father cleared his throat. "You've made your point." I felt it then. Not anger, a kind of quiet clarity that made everything sharp. "My point wasn't to make a point," I said. "It was to stop something unsafe." Daniel frowned. "Yeah, but now it's like your whole identity." I looked at him. "Only because no one else wanted it to be visible." Carol sighed. "You're young. You don't need to carry this." I nodded. "You're right. I don't need to carry it alone. That's why I didn't." My mother's voice tightened. "Hannah, this family values discretion." "I value accountability," I replied. Silence fell over the table. Heavy, uncomfortable. My father spoke next, slower than usual. "This is changing how people see us." I met his eyes. It changed how patients were treated first. That was the moment. The one where they realized this wasn't a phase, or stress, or something they could smooth over with time. Carol pushed back her chair. "You're being stubborn." "No," I said. "I'm being consistent." After dinner, my mother followed me into the hallway. "You didn't have to embarrass everyone," she whispered. "I didn't embarrass anyone," I said. I refused to lie. Her eyes filled. We protected you the only way we knew how. You protected yourselves, I replied. Not cruelly, accurately. I left shortly after. That night, an email arrived from nursing school administration. Subject: Outcome of professional conduct review. I opened it slowly. No action required. Student demonstrated adherence to ethical reporting standards. Program supports continued clinical placement. I exhaled, long and slow. At the hospital, things continued to shift. The escalation protocol draft circulated for feedback. My comments were included, not singled out, integrated. During a shift, a new intern hesitated before speaking up about a patient's vitals. Then she looked at me. I think we should call this in, she said. I nodded. I agree. No one rolled their eyes. Later, Dr. Wallace caught up with me near the charting station. You're changing the temperature, she said. I'm just not pretending it's fine, I replied. She smiled. That's usually enough. At home, my mother stopped calling. My father stopped asking questions. Daniel avoided me unless he needed something. The family system was recalibrating without my compliance. That's when my Aunt Carol sent the message. We love you, but you're taking this too far. I didn't reply. Because when people tell you you're too much, what they usually mean is you're no longer manageable. A week later, Victor Salazar called. We finalized the settlement terms, he said. This time, there was money. Not a fortune. Enough to cover tuition. Enough to erase my loans. And one more thing. A confidentiality clause. I read it carefully. What happens if I don't sign? I asked. Victor didn't hesitate. We proceed without closure. Publicly. I thought about my parents. The dinner. The fear in my mother's eyes. The pressure to stay quiet. I'll sign, I said. With an amendment. Victor smiled into the phone. I could hear it. Of course you will. The amendment was simple. I could continue serving on the advisory panel. I could speak in educational settings. I could not be silenced from prevention. They agreed. When I signed, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt steady. That night, I stood in my room, packing for the move I hadn't told anyone about yet. A small apartment closer to the hospital. My name alone on the lease. As I folded my scrubs, I realized something. This wasn't revenge. This was removal. Removal of access. Removal of narrative control. Removal of the version of me that absorbed damage to keep peace. And once removed, it couldn't be put back. The hardest part was still coming. Not with the hospital. With my family realizing that the old roles were gone and that there would be no apology big enough to restore them. I moved out on a Tuesday. No announcement. No argument. Just boxes. A borrowed SUV, and a lease I'd signed 2 weeks earlier without telling anyone in my family. The apartment was small, 1 bedroom, 3rd floor, close enough to the hospital that I could walk if my car died, far enough that no one would drop by. The first night there, I slept on a mattress on the floor and woke up without dread for the first time in years. That's how I knew I'd done the right thing. My parents found out 3 days later. My mother called while I was reviewing medication charts for the next shift. You moved, she said. Not a question. Yes, you didn't tell us. I wasn't asking permission. Silence stretched across the line. Then her voice softened, which was always more dangerous. We're your family. I know, I said. That's why this is hard. No, she replied. It's hard because you're shutting us out. I closed my eyes. I'm not shutting you out. I'm choosing space. For what? She asked. You won. The hospital admitted fault. You got what you wanted. That sentence told me everything. I didn't want to win, I said. I wanted to stop disappearing. She didn't answer. At the hospital, the atmosphere shifted again. Not dramatically. Subtly. People stopped whispering when I walked past. New interns introduced themselves. Nurses asked my opinion without hedging. One afternoon, a resident named Dr. Ethan Clark stopped me outside a patient room. I read the escalation update, he said. You were part of that, right? Yes, he nodded. It changed how we do rounds. I didn't realize how much we'd normalized ignoring interns. I didn't thank him. I didn't need to. This time, I spoke less. Others spoke more. The system was adjusting. That's how real change looks. It stops needing you to carry it. The family pressure, however, escalated. My Aunt Carol sent another message. This one longer. Your mother is heartbroken. She thinks you hate her. Is this really worth tearing the family apart? I stared at the screen. Then I typed one sentence. I don't hate her. I just won't disappear anymore. I muted the thread. Daniel tried next. He showed up at my apartment unannounced on a Saturday afternoon, standing awkwardly in the hallway, like he wasn't sure which role he was supposed to play. Mom's not doing great, he said. I know. She thinks you're cutting her off. I'm not. She doesn't see the difference. That's not my job anymore, I replied. He shifted his weight. You're different. Yes, you don't help like you used to. I met his eyes. You never noticed when I was helping. That landed harder than I expected. He looked away. I need a place to crash for a bit, he said quietly. Just until I get back on my feet. There it was. The old reflex flared. The one that said fix, accommodate, smooth. I let it pass. I can help you look for resources, I said. I can't house you. He stared at me. Seriously? Yes. He laughed once, sharp. You've changed. I've stabilized, I said. He left without another word. That night, I sat on my balcony and watched the hospital lights blink on in the distance. I thought about all the times I'd absorbed inconvenience so others wouldn't feel it. I thought about how often I'd been praised for being easy. Easy is expensive. The email from Victor Salazar arrived Monday morning. Settlement finalized. Funds dispersed. Documentation attached. I opened the attachment. The numbers were clean. Final. Student loans? Paid. Tuition balance? Clear. No debt. No leverage left for anyone else to use. I didn't celebrate. I closed the document and went to work. During shift change, a new intern froze while giving report. Her voice wobbled. She lost her place. No one jumped in to correct her. She finished, took a breath. I caught her eye and nodded. Later, she found me near the lockers. Thank you, she said. For what? For staying quiet until I finished, she replied. People don't usually do that. I smiled. You were doing fine. She smiled back, relief visible. At home that night, I cooked pasta in my small kitchen and realized I hadn't thought about my family for hours. That was new. If you're still here, if this story feels close to something you've lived or watched someone else live, take a moment. Like the video, subscribe, leave a comment. Not for me, for the person who needs to hear that choosing yourself doesn't mean you're cruel. It means you're done bleeding quietly. The next message came from my mother 2 days later. Can we meet? Just us. I stared at it for a long time. I wasn't afraid of the meeting. I was afraid of slipping back into old patterns. I typed back. Yes, but not at home. Public place. 1 hour. She agreed. The cafe was neutral, bright. No corners to hide in. She looked smaller than I remembered. Older. Tired. I don't recognize us anymore, she said after we sat down. I do, I replied. This is just the first time we're both visible. She pressed her lips together. I thought keeping you safe meant keeping you quiet. I know, I said. I didn't realize how much it cost you. I nodded. I didn't either. Until I stopped paying it. She reached across the table. I didn't pull away. I didn't lean in. I don't want to lose you, she said. You won't, I replied. But you won't own me either. She closed her eyes. That was the closest we'd come to honesty in years. When I left the cafe, I felt lighter, not reconciled, aligned. There was one chapter left, not in the hospital, not with my family, inside me. And it would decide what kind of future all of this actually led to. The quiet after a boundary is never empty. It's just unfamiliar. After meeting my mother, I expected fallout. Guilt texts, late-night calls, emotional whiplash disguised as concern. None of that came. Instead, the silence settled in, like a new climate. Cooler, clearer, unforgiving if you dressed wrong. At the hospital, my final rotation accelerated. ICU step-down demanded precision, stamina, and the ability to speak without apology. I thrived there in a way that surprised even me. Dr. Renee Wallace stopped correcting my phrasing. She started asking my opinion. During a complex case involving sepsis markers that didn't match the textbook progression, I flagged a pattern. The resident hesitated. Dr. Wallace didn't. Order the lab, she said. Hannah's right. Later, in the break room, she looked at me over her coffee. You don't hedge, she said. You assess. I used to hedge, I replied. She nodded. It's trained out of a lot of women. The advisory panel wrapped up its first phase in mid-semester. New escalation protocols were approved. Mandatory acknowledgement requirements went live. Training modules were updated. My name wasn't on any announcement. That was intentional. Systems don't like heroes. They like fixes that don't point back to fault. I was fine with that. At home, or rather in my apartment, life simplified. I studied. I slept. I ate real meals at real times. I stopped waiting for the other shoe to drop. Daniel didn't call again. My father sent one text. "Your mother worries you're drifting." I didn't respond, because drifting implies losing direction. I had never been clearer. 2 weeks before graduation clearance, nursing school administration scheduled a final review meeting. Routine, procedural, necessary. The dean, Dr. Karen Holt, sat across from me with my file closed. "You've had an unusual final year," she said. "Yes." She opened the folder. "Your evaluations from ICU step-down are exemplary." I waited. She leaned back. "Your conduct review was flagged early. It is now closed. Favorably." "I know." She studied me. "You didn't take the easy route." "No." She smiled slightly. "You took the ethical one." I didn't correct her. Ethics is what people call survival after the fact. That afternoon, I walked through the hospital lobby and realized something else had shifted. Security nodded. Nurses smiled. Interns didn't flinch. I wasn't bracing anymore. I was occupying space. The call from Victor Salazar came that evening. "Final paperwork is complete," he said. "There will be no further action from the hospital. You're free." Free. The word landed heavier than expected. After we hung up, I sat on the floor of my apartment and stared at the blank wall opposite the couch I hadn't bothered to decorate yet. Freedom isn't loud. It's quiet enough that you can hear yourself think. That's when the last test arrived. Not as a crisis, as an invitation. My mother emailed. No subject line. No long explanation. Just this: "I start counseling next week. I don't know what I'm doing yet. I just wanted you to know." I read it 3 times. Then I closed my laptop. I didn't respond immediately. Not because I didn't care, because I needed to answer from the right place. 2 days later, I replied, "Thank you for telling me. I hope it helps. I'm not ready to rebuild yet, but I'm open to seeing what changes." I didn't soften it. I didn't weaponize it either. That balance felt new. Earned. Graduation clearance came through the following week. I printed the email, folded it, put it in a drawer. I didn't call my parents. I didn't post. I went to work. During my last shift as an intern, Samuel Ortiz found me near the lockers. "You did good," he said. "I know," I replied. He smiled. "That's the right answer." When I walked out of the hospital that night, the air felt different. Not celebratory. Grounded. I had lost illusions. I had lost roles that didn't fit. I had lost the ability to be easily managed. What I gained didn't announce itself, but it stayed. And as I locked my apartment door behind me and set my keys down, I understood something I hadn't before. Revenge isn't loud destruction. It's controlled redefinition. It's refusing to carry narratives that were never yours. It's walking forward without asking the people who benefited from your silence whether they approve. There was one chapter left, not about them, about who I chose to be when no one was watching. And that choice, finally, was mine alone. The offer arrived quietly, the way real opportunities usually do. It came through email from Dr. Renee Wallace, sent at 5:48 a.m. Subject line, plain, post-graduation placement. I read it standing in my kitchen, coffee untouched. The ICU step-down unit wanted to offer me a full-time RN position, contingent on licensure. Nights to start, higher acuity, higher pay, clear chain of escalation, protected reporting baked into the unit culture. No mention of my past, no praise, no disclaimers, just work. I accepted within 10 minutes. That afternoon, I passed my mother's house on the way to a grocery store I'd never shopped at before. I noticed the curtains were open. My father's car wasn't in the driveway. For a moment, an old instinct stirred. The one that asked if I should stop by. It passed. Not with bitterness, with neutrality. At the hospital, preparations for my transition moved smoothly. HR processed paperwork without comment. Occupational health cleared me in one visit. No extra steps, no just-in-case meetings. That was how I knew the institution had finished metabolizing what happened. Systems don't apologize. They adjust. My family, however, was still adjusting. My mother called one evening while I was studying medication interactions. "I told your father about counseling," she said. "And?" "He didn't react well." I waited. "He thinks I'm blaming him." I closed my book. "You're not responsible for how he reacts," she exhaled. "I'm learning that." There was a pause. Then, softer, "I miss you." "I know," I said. "You don't come by anymore." "No." "That hurts." "I know," I said again. The truth didn't need embellishment. Daniel texted 2 days later. "I got a warehouse job. It's temporary." "Good," I replied. That was it. No advice, no rescue. I was done parenting sideways. Graduation rehearsal came and went without incident. I stood in line with my cohort, listened to instructions, smiled when appropriate. People congratulated me. Some knew the story, most didn't. I liked it that way. On the morning of graduation, I woke early and sat on the edge of my bed, hands resting on my knees. No nerves, no racing thoughts, just presence. My parents sat together in the auditorium, a few rows back. My mother waved when she saw me. My father nodded once. They didn't come backstage. They didn't need to. When my name was called, I walked across the stage and shook hands with Dr. Karen Holt. She smiled, genuine this time. "Well done," she said. I believed her. Afterward, my mother hugged me carefully, like she was testing new rules. "I'm proud of you," she said. "Thank you," I replied. My father stood behind her. "You worked hard," he said. "Yes," I agreed. No absolution, no confrontation, just facts. That evening, alone in my apartment, I opened the drawer and took out the printed email confirming my RN placement. I read it slowly, then placed it back. I thought about the version of myself who used to wait for permission to exist fully. She had done her best. She had gotten me here, but she wasn't needed anymore. I poured a glass of water and stood by the window, watching the city lights flicker on. Somewhere, interns were starting night shifts. Somewhere, alarms would sound. Somewhere, someone would hesitate before speaking up. And maybe, because of a quiet paper trail and a refusal to disappear, they wouldn't be ignored. That was enough. The past didn't need rewriting. It needed boundaries. And the future didn't need approval. It needed clarity. There was only one thing left to do now: live the life that no longer required permission. And let that be the loudest thing I ever said. My first night as a licensed nurse began without ceremony. No speeches, no applause. Just a badge that opened doors it hadn't before, and a unit that expected me to already know who I was. ICU step-down moved differently at night. Fewer voices, sharper focus, less tolerance for ego. I liked it immediately. At 7:02 p.m., Dr. Renee Wallace handed me the assignment sheet. "Your primary on beds 12 and 14, she said. "Both stable. For now." "For now," I repeated. She looked at me once, measuring. "If that changes, you speak." "I will." And I meant it, without checking how it would land. The shift tested me quietly. A blood pressure trend that didn't match the chart narrative. A medication timing discrepancy. A family member asking the wrong questions for the right reasons. I handled it all without shrinking. At 2:18 a.m., bed 14's oxygen saturation dipped. Not a crash, a warning. I escalated immediately. Respiratory responded. Orders adjusted. The patient stabilized. No drama, no resistance. Later, while charting, I felt something unexpected. Calm. Not the numb calm I used to mistake for resilience. The real kind. The kind that comes from knowing you won't be punished for being correct. On my break, I sat alone in the quiet room and checked my phone. No missed calls, no messages loaded with subtext. Just a text from my mother, sent earlier. "Hope your first shift goes well." I stared at it. Then I typed back. "It did. Thank you." No more, no less. That was the relationship now. Defined, honest, bounded. At 6:45 a.m., shift change came. I gave report clearly, efficiently. The incoming nurse nodded, asked one question, and thanked me. When I walked out of the hospital into the early morning light, something settled in my chest. This was mine. Not borrowed, not provisional, mine. I drove home with the windows down, city quiet, mind even quieter. Later that afternoon, I sat on my apartment floor with my back against the couch, shoes kicked off, scrubs folded neatly beside me. I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't scroll. I just sat, and I thought about everything that hadn't happened. No apology tour, no dramatic reconciliation, no moment where everyone suddenly understood. That used to bother me. It doesn't anymore. Because the truth is, closure isn't something other people give you. It's something you stop asking for. My family still exists. So do their limitations. My mother is trying. My father is distant. Daniel is figuring himself out without leaning on me. That's their work. Mine is done. I used to think revenge meant making people feel what you felt. I was wrong. Revenge is making their behavior irrelevant to your future. It's outgrowing the role they wrote for you and refusing to audition for a replacement. It's choosing a life that doesn't require their validation to function. The hospital didn't crown me. They corrected a system. My family didn't transform. They adjusted to losing access, and I didn't become louder. I became harder to erase. If you've stayed with me until now, if this story echoed something uncomfortably familiar, take a moment. Like, subscribe, leave a comment. Not because I need it, but because someone else is sitting in a break room right now, wondering if speaking up is worth the cost. It is. Not because it fixes everything, but because it fixes you. This isn't a story about nursing, or hospitals, or families. It's about what happens when the quiet one stops absorbing damage and starts documenting reality. It's about choosing dignity over comfort, clarity over approval, and yourself over the version of you that kept the peace by disappearing. That's the end of my story, and the beginning of the life I don't have to explain anymore.